Welcome to Ethical Edge Insights, Conversations with ChangeMakers, a space for deeply reflective conversations with those shaping our world. Here we explore their journeys, their greatest challenges, their most significant contributions to date, the contributions they seek to make, and how ethics have shown up along the way. Join us as we uncover the stories that shape our shared future. So, good morning for me, Dawn, and good evening for you in Brisbane, Australia, correct?
Gold Coast, actually, but yes, almost Brisbane.
Yeah. So my home country originally, and I recall when we first met, and it was during some discussion groups we had with David Clutterbuck, and they were, I think I got to be known as someone who's having maybe a lot to say, but they were really, really interesting discussions, I found. And some of those discussions form some of the impetus for the ethics work that I'm doing now, believe it or not. And I don't know if I've ever shared that with you. But I'm really delighted to have you here today and have a chat about some areas of your work and our work. And if you could start by giving us some more information about you, like where are you from? Because you're not in your native country, and wherever you'd like to take us from there.
So I'm originally from Liverpool in the UK, and I have been in Australia about 7 years. We emigrated to Australia quite late in life after I did about 25 years in the UK civil service at quite senior levels with a background in HR. And I did most of my study whilst I was still in the civil service. So coaching, organizational development, team dynamics, all of those kind of good things. And as an HR director, did lots of big change and transformation and restructuring and all the technical aspects of it. But I was always more interested in how the people responded to that change rather than the mechanics of the change itself. And I then moved to the NHS. I was a HR director of OD, and spent a bit of time in the NHS on various boards. And then we went into financial meltdown, and I was the last woman standing to be the financial turnaround director. It was very basic maths under my belt. And I did it through appealing to behaviour change of the organisation as opposed to cut and burn, save money. I spoke to the people and asked them what they thought we should do and then helped them do the things they thought we should do. And that was a brilliant lesson in the power of behavioural science and people's buy-in to change. And so when I was successful in that, I quite quickly moved to running my own business, teaching other people how to do that from a coaching perspective. So now I run my own business in the UK and in Australia and wherever else it takes me. And I usually have about 4 or 5 one-to-one coaching clients at any one time, and then an organisation or a couple of organisations who I work with their leadership team and support their leadership team to be better leaders. So the Stellar Leadership Group strapline, if you like, is better leaders deliver better outcomes. So I really think that the key to organizational success and the key to people being happy in their workplace is the quality of the leaders that they work with. That's what I try to, where I try to enter organizations now.
So you're currently in Brisbane, and tell us more about your work there in Australia.
Well, I pretty much, because I spent so much time in the public sector, I pretty much specialise in public sector organisations. I do a little bit of charity work in charities as opposed to charity work, although I do usually have about 20% of the work that I do that's pro bono. And so I work for the federal government, state government, and lots of healthcare, public healthcare in Australia. So I've probably worked in every Queensland Health Hospital, Western Australia, New South Wales. And I usually get recommended onto the next place from the work that I've done. And I'm often called in to work in places where other people have already worked and whatever it is, hasn't worked. So there's a problem solving element and I guess a structural and technical element to some of the consulting that I would do. But my strong belief that guides me, my sort of North Star, my navigation is nothing else matters other than the relationships you're able to create in the organization. And if you get those right, then everything else just falls into place. It's easy to do the hard stuff when the what people think is the soft stuff works well. So it's interesting that I'll often get asked to do a piece of work, and we might get onto this later. But they don't want we don't need to work on the exact relationships with each other because they'll be fine. And I often then say, well, that'll be lovely for you to work with someone else then, but you won't be working with me. So my work is always a mix of relationship building between leaders, coaching of CEOs or very senior leaders, and practical tools to help the organization run better as they implement their better relationships, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I mean, you just have an amazing story. You know, you're one of those quiet achievers. So I'm so stoked to have asked you to come and speak with me here. It's I'm curious that you've come from that HR space. And what did you do to help you make that move into the human development space beyond your experiences at work?
Um, well, it's an interesting question because I guess it depends what you see HR as.
Mhm.
And HR in large corporations, be they public or private sector, usually split into two parts. There's usually the police of the organization who pay the money, tell people off, and write disciplinary policies. So it's very technical and transactional. And then there's the airy fairy, and I'm sort of camping this up for effect. The airy fairy OD and L&D people who love the world to be better and just want to play in that space of future possibility and aren't very rooted in reality. And actually, I always came, even from when I was very junior in HR, I always came from the perspective that you had to at least know enough about both of those elements of HR to be successful, because one sat very well alongside the other. And that's not in the HR world, that's not a widely shared or widely held perspective. So what that meant for me as I got more and more senior was that I always set up my people functions, as I would routinely rename them, even in the early days when they were called personnel departments, to be both and. So I was one of the first people in the UK public sector to introduce HR business partners who had both the technical skills and the organizational development skills. So they could use the data to work out what needed some solutions, and then they could provide the tools to help the business find their own solutions, which is at its heart a coaching approach, isn't it? You use some tools to help people work out what they need to do, and then you support them to do it. And so I think that might have been why I was really quite successful, because I was able to sit alongside all of the businesses that I was in and help them be better than they were, rather than just be the HR bod who sat in the corner telling people when they've done something wrong. So it's and if to really answer your question, it's kind of a natural curiosity about what could be different and better, which comes from the way I was brought up and a whole host of other things, I guess.
Okay. And what other kind of studies that you've done across time?
So
I know.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
know.
I did a master's in HR when I was in the civil service, and then I did the NTL program for organisational development practitioners out of in Oxford in about 2009. Alongside that was probably the first time I did a formal coaching qualification, 2008, 2009. And then I did a postgraduate diploma in coaching supervision, I don't know, maybe about 2011, something like that. So I've been supervising ever since. And then I'm a member of EMCC. That's my accreditation body of choice.
Mm.
And I'm just going through the process with EMCC of they've invited me to apply for master practitioner. And so I'm
Mm.
just going through the process of that. And I do a lot of team coaching. But I've shied away from EMCC's accreditation on team coaching because, and we might come on to some of this later as well, it's just really too complex and too rigid
Mm.
for what I think the world needs now from team coaches. So I'm still debating that really. And I've just got from the work that we do to gather data on the questions to ask teams for them to self-assess whether they're successful through the Stellar model. We just head into enough data to be able to then do some proper research on that. And so whether or not that'll turn into a PhD, your guess is as good as mine at this stage, I think.
Well, it's great to hear. I love the stories that you're still studying formally, potentially formally studying, even at this part of your career. I think that's fabulous, and I love that the world, well, at least some parts of the world actually allow that to happen. I know Australia allows lifelong learning at academic institutions, and so I've always been really proud of that part of the Australian education system. Um, Wow, it's just like so you've just been everywhere. You've just done so much, and I really appreciate your honest responses and thinking in relation to some of the accreditations as well. That's really interesting to hear. Um, so what do you consider to be your most important contribution that in any of the spaces, it doesn't have to be coaching per se?
I think I've been reflecting on, and I'm often asked why I've been successful. And I've always had the ability to be unafraid to speak the truth to power. And so what that meant when working in government was I was quite happy to tell minister or secretary of state that I thought what they were going to do was absolutely bonkers and it shouldn't be done. I never felt any need for, I was graceful and polite, but I never felt any need to be restrained from that. And what that also meant in my professional capacity was that I was able to tell one minister who wanted to sack a head social worker from a council who he didn't employ and couldn't, and it was a child protection case that was in the news. And I remember saying to him, well, this is not going to go well for you if you do this. But, do it if you want, but it's not going to go well for you. And explain why. And it didn't go well for him in the end.
Mm.
And you sort of what that does now then is it allows me to, and always has allowed me to sit in a space of being quite we talk a lot in coaching and in team coaching particularly about being able to hold a mirror up to an organization. And I come across a lot of people who want to be team coaches or who think that they are team coaches, but are unable in a room full of very senior people to say, really, is this how you want your organization to view you all? By making these kind of decisions, but doing it in a way that, you still retain their trust. And I think that in the teaching that I do now about how to facilitate group dynamics, helping people understand their own power and presence in that ability to speak the truth to power. And as long as it is truthful and graceful and polite, then people will listen. I feel like I've passed that on to lots of other people. The
Mm.
the the real purity, and the light bulb moment that brings in organizations. And I feel that that's a good USP that I have and that I've brought to the the people that certainly are learning from me about this work.
Yeah. And it's interesting about this mirror that we have. And I was reminded a couple of years ago about the mirror from a negative experience where I discussed it with, I remember um, just broadly having a conversation with David Drake about some things, not any specifics, but about some things. And he said to me, yeah, but when you hold the mirror up, remember, you got to stand there and look at the mirror with them. And I'm like, damn, that's what I didn't do. I forgot to do that because I was just so astounded by the really bad behavior of a couple of individuals that I was working with. Like, disappointed, astounded. I just couldn't believe that they had showed such a face in the professional space towards me. But towards me, yes, because of the relationship I had with them, but also just generally, I'm like, wow, does anyone else know that this is a part of who you are? It's disgusting, right? And so I had so many depths of emotions around what was happening because it was coming at me,
Yeah.
that I was putting the mirror back. I'm like, really? I need to show you people what you're doing so you can look and say, this is how I'm showing up right now. Is this really true to who I am as a person, as a professional, to treat people this way? That they're missing the beat on, one-on-one on project conflict management and stuff. So it's and I'm just like, and it was really tense, really a big struggle. And I'm having this conversation with Dave Drake, and he says to me, yeah, but Wendy Ann, you got to always look at the mirror with them. And I'm like, damn, and
Yeah.
it was
And
so
I think
powerful.
I think that speaks really well to so one of the sessions I run in the program is about use of self, management of self, the triggers, and doing some deep work with people to find out what their triggers are, really, not what they think that they're supposed to say in public, but really what do they get hooked by.
Mm.
And one of the maturity lessons, I think, that I'm getting more comfortable with, I won't say I've mastered it, is the ability to use the phrase in my head. That's interesting. So if I keep down this track of thought, I am going to react as opposed to I'm going to be the facilitator of their reaction.
Mm.
And it's that over time, I remember a very salutary lesson. Well, I'd been on a course, I think, and years ago, I was the mouthpiece for other people's dissatisfaction. As I've matured, I've got to the point of helping them decide whether they want to voice their own dissatisfaction. I think that's the difference. Well, I remember going on a course and I was facilitating a large group meeting, I think. Nothing really phenomenal, but a guy who really wound me up in the workplace. I'd made a suggestion about what we might do, and he said something to really throw water on what I'd said. And ordinarily, my response would have been to directly attack him back
Mm.
and have a one-to-one about this thing. And I said, because of something I'd learned on the course, interesting. What does everybody else think about what this guy just said? And everybody else just poured water on his thoughts.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I found it fascinating, and I thought, wow, that's really powerful. I
Mm.
actually don't need to occupy that space anymore. I need to use the wisdom of the room to calibrate where we need to be as a group. And that was probably, that was years and years ago, maybe 30 years ago. And I still remember that moment now.
Yeah, they can be powerful, little reminders when they come. It's not something I've ever forgotten since. So tell me about, we're going to move directly into ethics now. And and I know that you're ethically minded person. And so tell me about how it shows up in your decision making. And then do you have a specific example to share?
Um, so I don't know why I feel the need to define what I mean by ethics, but I'm going to just for a little bit. And so for me, it's does what I'm about to do next feel right? Does it calibrate with my own standards for myself and my own standards for my profession? And so I mentioned earlier that I have a very strong guiding principle that intervening in a system requires the leaders of the system to change for the better, so that they can then carry on the work when I exit. So all of my contracts have a skills transfer, specific skills transfer, and an exit pathway in them at the beginning. And I recently did a bid for a large piece of work for an NHS trust in the UK, where they wanted some support with financial turnaround from the practical point of view. And they thought that they might need a little bit of team coaching, but they weren't sure. So normally what I'd do is go in and do a bit of diagnostic, a couple of days diagnostic. So I went in, did a couple of days diagnostic, and they needed a lot of work with the exec team. And so I took the report back to the chair and the chief executive and said, this is what you need to do. And they went, oh, no, I don't think we need to do that. Everybody's really nice. And I said, yeah, that's part of the problem. What do you mean by nice? And nice isn't always good for an organization. You need to have some good conflict discussions. You need to have some good disagreements to move the organization forward. Oh, no, we don't want any of that. So I said, well, okay, then I'm happy to recommend you, one of the financial accounting organizations that can do this other work with you. And so I think that's one example of me. I don't feel the need to chase the work or chase the revenue for the business. I feel the need to do good work where it's going to be beneficial to a system and then to the end recipients of that system, because most of my work's in the public sector. So that's one example. I've probably got others if you need some more.
I'm happy to hear what you're happy to share. So then I want to move to challenges, which are not necessarily ethical, even if they have ethics underpinning them. So can you tell us about a challenge you've had and then you've overcome it in some way? Some people actually, the challenge has turned out that they lost the work. So it's not always that it's a financial win or an ongoing work win. It can show up in different ways, the kind of wins you might, if you want to look at it as being a win. But it's like overcoming it. So a challenge, and tell us the story and what you did to overcome it, some of the challenges that were there.
Well, so I'll take you back to my last paid role before I started to work for myself. And I'd done this financial turnaround role for 15 months or so, been really successful. I'd given up my permanent post because when I went into it, I absolutely believed I'd have to make some really difficult decisions in order to save the money for the organisation, that it wouldn't be viable for me to stay on in the organisation. As it happened, it was entirely viable for me to stay on in the organisation, and I ended up with a position, not my original substantive post, but the post was called Exec Director of Strategy and Transformation, I think, something like that. So it was a nice post. I could make it what I wanted. The chair of the organisation at the time, then we lost the chief executive, and we were recruiting for the chief executive, and she asked me to apply and courted me to do this application. And I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a go. And I didn't even get an interview. And I thought, it's really interesting. So, as you would, I sought feedback. And she said, yeah, she said, I've spoken to a couple of the other non-executives, and they just thought you were quite strident when you were the turnaround director, and they didn't really think that they'd be able to work with you in the chief executive role. I just thought, isn't that fascinating? I
Yeah.
probably said a few different words at the time to myself, but I thought, so there's two men who didn't like me being a strong woman, and yet the way that I'd handled that role meant we got back into financial balance, got off the naughty step with the NHS, and I protected their roles on the board. And the chair, who I would be working to as the chief executive, wasn't strong enough to tell both of them to pipe down.
Wow.
I just thought, and I said to her there and then, I wasn't petulant. I just said to her, look, I appreciate your honesty. I thought you were better than that. And I'm glad you didn't put me through to be chief executive because I couldn't have worked with you if that's how you're going to run this organization. So here's my resignation. And good luck. And I left a month later, started my own business, and haven't looked back since. And I just think that's fascinating display of well, cowardice actually,
Mm.
and a lack of ethics. And how I then is frightening because I didn't have any work to go to. I didn't really know what I was actually going to do next. But I thought I can't stay in a place that doesn't value the fact that I'd put my career on the line to
Mm.
do something for the organization actually then turned out really very well.
Yeah. All because you were a strong woman and they went, how threatened am I by having a strong woman who's willing to say it like it is?
Right. Yeah. And that just probably reinforced for me the need to continue to do that in the rest of my career.
Mm.
If it was the right thing to do, and not just for the sake of doing it, if it will, there's something about being me and Chung Judge says, we need to be the grit in the oyster of organizations. And so there's something about agitation, not just for the sake of disruption, but for the sake of getting people to wake up a bit to how different it can be when it's better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very comfortable agitating for that purpose and for there to be a good outcome for them, really.
Yeah, but you're doing more than that.
Mm.
You're you're being a voice of women who have been aligned because they're strong, because they bring the female space to a male space and they do it quite well. So you're one of those quiet but fierce, intelligent leaders who's willing to shake it up. I mean, I
Well, I'm a lot quieter now than I used to be. I mean, the people who know me certainly wouldn't call me quiet, but yeah, I now have the wisdom of maturity to be able to pick my moments that will be for best effect. Whereas I've developed the ability most of the time to keep my powder dry for the point in which it will be most effective. Whereas the effervescence of youth did not give me that skill.
Oh, no, I understand that, don't you worry. And thank goodness we have the passage of time to give us a little bit of wisdom so we're not carrying the world on our shoulders, and voicing where we don't have to. The amount of energy that you can expend is just astounding when you're someone who is fierce, and willing to speak truth to power. When I say quiet, I mean you're not one of those people gone out seeking fame. You've just gone about doing your work, and having a strong voice in that. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. So, what do you think your legacy? Now, everyone has a legacy of some kind. It's just about how they might frame it up. What do you hope yours to be?
Well, I've got to the stage now in my career where one of my purposes, and it's a strong purpose, is to pass on what I know and what I've learned. And so I do a lot of freebie leadership seminars where I'm always online promoting various things like that. People turn up, take what they need from it. We provide a lot of education in how to facilitate group dynamics, group sessions. And I think if I was to really pinpoint one thing that I'd like to be known for in the passage of time, it would be the ability to get as many people as possible to cultivate the ability to notice what's going on in a room or a system or a relationship, and to be able to gracefully name it. So I say, it's a phrase I use a lot, and notice and name. And that's so powerful. And it's the core of what runs through most of the teaching that I do. A, for facilitators, B, for presenting skills and people being able to do that well and engage audiences online and face to face. But also even in the leadership sessions that we're in at the moment are 3 on leading self, 3 on leading others, and 3 on leading systems. And even through the leading self ones, it's the ability to notice what's going on inside of you and
Yeah.
name it, and then be able to go, oh, fascinating. Okay, that's what this is all about then. Right. So my choices are just to roll with it and have no control, or to take some control over what happens. But that notice and name, it runs through everything. And I like saying that to reinforce it. And it's a quality that I teach to others often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we start, isn't it? Building that self-awareness, and then what we choose to do with it once it's there. It's very important. What do you believe is the most pressing issue in the field today? And I know you work across fields, so just take that where you would like.
Well, I might have 2 if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
So
go for it.
the first one is I'm still shocked by, I'm shocked every time it happens actually, by the lack of knowledge of people in organizations who buy in, coaches,
Mm-hmm.
consultants, etc., etc. They don't know what they want at the beginning. They don't do any due diligence to find out whether the people who they're bringing in have got any qualifications at all. And some of the tools that you see out there that people are using have got no rigor behind them, you know, that, and I just think the prevalence of people who are able to call themselves coaches in lots of different forms. And I don't really want to sound snobbish, because I don't mind whoever wants to set themselves up to do, if they're doing a good job and helping other people, go for it. And yet, delving into a CEO's mind with them is a really dangerous space to be. You just think of the power of suggestion, the power of some of the questions we ask as coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that in unregulated hands, worse still, to have that in unregulated hands because the person who's bought it doesn't even know how regulation systems could work, even if they did. It's just bonkers. And so I think that's, we need, there's too much separation in all of the various bodies when actually they're all really trying to do the same thing. They're just using different languages. So it's a bit like lots of different religions. They all believe in us. Well, not all, but there's many religions that believe in a single powerful being of some sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
couldn't we all just get along nicely? It's sort of the same in the coaching world. Really need to do a lot more to get together and say to the business world, if you're going to employ a coach or a team coach, you really need to have this qualification or have this many hours of experience, etc. So I think that's a huge one.
We actually we actually have I'm heading up a project at the moment on that. So it's all the coaching bodies are in a conversation at the moment. We have a draft document there ready for everyone to complete and sign off, and that's going to be a communication piece. Speaking to exactly what you're speaking to now.
Great. I'm all in favour of that. I think the second one would be I might sound like I'm on a soapbox with this one, so feel free to tell me to be quiet. I get a little bit agitated with the notion of team coaching being a thing that's new and we've got to do lots of training on it and everybody needs to call it team coaching. And if I go right the way back to the early 2000s when I started doing my organizational development training, and you think of Jarvis Bush and Bob Marshak and all of the now quite elderly gurus of the NTL and the Kurt Lewin stable, I suppose, of OD practitioners. Everything that team coaching is about has got its roots in there. And I sort of feel, I don't think they feel bad at all. So I don't know why I feel bad for them, but I almost feel as though coaching's hijacked all of that work. And now we've called it team coaching and we keep saying, oh, it's a very new thing. And it's not that new anymore. And so the course that we run is called Mastering Facilitation, because group process facilitation is essentially what team coaching is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sort of almost want to shake the EMCC, ICS a bit and say, can we not just give them the credit for having made all these models and done all this research? And there's papers galore on, use of self. And so I guess really what I'm saying is the rebranding of things that have been working well for years to make them part of coaching is just a little bit annoying. It's not a pressing issue. But in a set of organizations that's ruled by ethical standards, I feel the need for some honesty about where all this stuff's come from, I suppose.
What do you think you could do about it?
Well, I've run a few webinars for EMCC on it, and here's where I'm resisting becoming an accredited EMCC team coach, because I don't think I need to. I've got the NTL 18-month-long program badge. I've been running, so I sort of that is me being a bit petulant, Wendy Ann, I think.
No, I don't think so. It sounds to me like you're standing on principle.
Yeah.
What if I were to suggest that you go power to voice and actually write a critique about it for the exclusive features of the Ethical Edge magazine and give all those people due credit?
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. I'm up for that. I'll go down in writing, and I've got all the slides for the couple of sessions I've run, for the GPS and things like that on it. So I've got all the material ready to go. I'm happy to write something on it. Absolutely.
I'm happy to receive it. Well, we're at the end of our conversation, but it's been delightful. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to see you
welcome.
again.
Yeah, I've loved it. Thank you very much for having me.